Hi, my name is Stacy Carto, and I live here with my husband and my 2 children, residents in Plymouth. And we moved here from Georgia about a year and a half ago. God brought me back home. I know a lot of people want to leave Minnesota because of the cold, but God brought me back up here after being gone for a really long time. And I heard a sermon from Pastor Dan a couple weeks ago that talked about being on a mountaintop and going into the valley and how God begins to move and really shows himself in the valley. And immediately in the service, I was reminded of my experience. And about 4 years ago, on October 2nd, I came home from the mountains in Georgia. I was with 2 of my girlfriends and we went away for the weekend. And we had this just amazing weekend of hiking and laughing and praying and just spending great time together, and felt relaxed when I got into bed. And at around 11 o'clock that night, I was laying there and my phone rang, which was odd at that time. And in a matter of seconds, my mountaintop experience went way down into the valley. And I got a phone call from my sister on the other line, and she was crying and told me that her son had taken his own life and that my nephew was gone. And at once, like I said, my world crashed and my head began spinning, and the tears began to come as I listened to my sister on the other end of the phone. The next month was a blur as I traveled up to Minnesota to be with my family and to watch the community here in Wayzata rally around my sister's family. And as I left home, I was numb. I got back to Georgia. I really didn't know how to function. And I remember sitting at my computer one day. I was thinking all these odd thoughts going through my head, and I was really desperate to find out what my sister and my brother-in-law were feeling, what they were going through. And I just found myself putting into Google, my son took his life. And I was just, like I said, searching, and up came this book called My Living Will. And it turns out it was written by a man who was an ex-Major League Baseball player for the Red Sox. And he lived in the neighboring town next to me in Georgia. And his son took his own life at 15 years old. And I started to read the first couple pages of this book thinking it would give me some sort of encouragement, some sort of inspiration. And what I came across was just a incredibly raw, detailed writing of what him and his wife experienced the day his son took his life. And I shuddered and closed the book, per se. And I was like, I can't read this. This does not help at all. And didn't think about that book really ever again. And fast forward to May of the next year, was May 2017, we flew out to Colorado because my niece was graduating from the Air Force Academy. And it was a really exciting time, bittersweet time, because we were out in Colorado, and that was a favorite spot of my nephew's. He was an extremely outdoorsy guy. He loved fishing, he loved hunting. Everything about him was outdoors. But we were there to celebrate, and we all managed to have a really great time together. And I was getting ready one day. I was finished, and I said, I'm gonna go down and hang out with my sister. And so I went into a room, and she was getting ready, and I sat down on the bed at the hotel room to talk to my brother-in-law, who was sitting in, like the chair that is in the corner. And as I sat on the bed, we were talking, and I looked over on his nightstand, and on the nightstand was this book, My Living Will. And I turned to him and I said, oh my goodness, are you reading that book? And he looked at me and he just said, yes, have you read it? And I said, well, no, but some of it. And I looked at him and I said, that's a really hard book to read. And his eyes welled up and he said, yes. And he began to describe to me how much his son and the boy in the book had in common and how similar their families were. And I went back to my hotel room and I thought, well, if he's gonna read it, I'm gonna read it. I don't care how hard it is. And so I ordered it so that it would be at home for me when I got there. We packed up our bags and said goodbye to everybody, and we proceeded to the airport. And we were flying on Southwest, and I don't know if you've ever flown on Southwest before, but if you have, you will know what C-class seating is. So we knew we weren't sitting together, and as we boarded the plane, My family was way ahead of me, and I just remember looking at the seats, and they were all middle seats, and so I sat down in one, kind of had a lull, and I sat there, and I remember going like this and just looking over to my right, and as I did, there was a man on his iPad. And just as I looked at his iPad, he was scrolling like this, and the cover of My Living Will was coming off of his screen. And I literally grabbed the guy's arm, and I said, "Oh my gosh, My Living Will." I said, "Are you reading that book?" And he looked at me and he said, "I wrote that book." And kind of like I am right now, my hands went to my face. And I think I cried for 5 minutes because I was so, freaked out and overwhelmed, and it was surreal, and I could not believe that this man next to me just told me that he wrote this book. And that was before takeoff, and for the next 3 hours we talked and we cried, and he listened and I shared, and vice versa. And it was unbelievable to connect with a man who gave me insight to what he went through with his son. And my head was spinning, and at the end of the flight we landed, we were still talking, got off the plane, and introduced him to my family and said goodbye. And I just was silent the whole way home. You know, the hardest thing about this, when my nephew passed away, was the why. And I struggled with God. I struggled with his sovereignty, because I believe in God's sovereignty. I believe he can reach his hand in and move mountains. He can move the heart of a king like he moves the river. And I struggled with why he allowed this to happen to my nephew, why he didn't stop him. And I still don't have that answer. And I know that God is good, because in my heart and my faith and my belief, I lean back on what I do know. All the things that I don't know, all the whys, I lean on what I do know. And I know he's good, and I know that he loves me, that he loves his children, and I know that he has a plan, and that whatever comes through my life has first gone before the mighty throne of God. And I like to encourage people who are feeling alone, feeling uncertain, feeling scared, feeling anxious, all those secret things sometimes that we hold on to in our hearts as we kind of put on a face as we go out, that for me, you don't have to do that with God, because he loves us and he sees, and he is at work in every single facet. You know, when you talk about how God knows the number of hairs on our head, or he sees every single tear that falls. Sometimes that's like a little cliche saying that we know, but when you really start to think about it, it's in the same intricate detail that God allowed this storyline to happen in my life, with the Google search and the book and the meeting on the airplane. He's doing that in every single person's life. And it's encouraging to me. And it's good for me to remember. You know, I sometimes think, why are you downcast, oh my soul? Remember what the Lord has done. And that experience for me, and that hope that hopefully by me sharing this story can give to somebody else, is that you are not alone and you are not out of God's sight. And that's a really great truth to hold on to.